It begins with a convoy that never arrived. April 1945, Germany's final days collapse under Allied bombardment, yet in the chaos, a coded order marked Eclipse left Berlin and travelled south toward the Austrian Alps. Officially, it was a routine extraction of Reichsbank assets. Unofficially, it carried something else, an object so classified that even SS courier units were replaced by men wearing unmarked insignia. The convoy's last confirmed sighting was near Linz, then nothing. No wreckage, no survivors. For decades, fragments of orders, intercepted communications, and sealed intelligence briefings hinted that Operation Eclipse was not about gold, but about power, one that no nation was meant to recover. Chapter 1: The Vanishing of Operation Eclipse. In the final, disoriented spring of 1945, the Reich was collapsing upon itself. Berlin burned, command structures fractured, communications, once rigidly efficient, dissolved into a haze of contradictory orders. Yet amid that chaos, a single operation, stamped with the Black Eagle insignia and sealed by Reich Main Security Office authorization, moved forward without delay. It was designated Unternehmen Eclipse. According to post-war Allied interrogations of surviving SS logistics officers, the convoy departed from Tempelhof Airfield on April 17, 1945. Its escort detail included members of the SS Technical Division and a detachment from Sonderkommando Riese, an engineering unit previously assigned to underground construction projects in Silesia. They travelled under the guise of an evacuation train carrying Reichsbank assets. But the manifest recovered from the Salzburg rail yards decades later lists something else. 12 steel containers marked Ahnenerbe-Forschung, nicht öffnen, ohne Genehmigung des Führungsamts. Ahnenerbe research, do not open without High Command authorization. At the time, the Ahnenerbe had already been implicated in a range of experimental programs, ranging from pseudoscientific anthropology to advanced energy research reportedly conducted at Obersalzberg. British intelligence, operating under Chaff Directive 143B, later declassified fragments of an intercepted telex dated April 18th. It referenced an object of anomalous magnetic yield, secured and bound for Obertraun. The meaning of this phrase has never been clarified. The convoy's last verified position was at a refueling point near Linz. After that, no record exists. American armoured units from the 11th Armoured Division entered the region a week later and found the roads clear, the villages abandoned, and an overturned truck bearing SS registration plates in a ravine near the Traunsee. The truck's cargo had been stripped. Only traces of reinforced steel straps and melted tar seals remained. Decades later, an OSS field report, classified until 1989, surfaced from the National Archives. It carried the header, Eclipse, Reassignment of Recovered Assets. Attached were 2 photographs, one of a makeshift mountain depot near Bad Aussee, the other of a cylindrical object half buried in snow. Both photographs bore the handwritten annotation, property of Army Air Forces Scientific Division, do not circulate. Witness accounts complicate the record further. A former Wehrmacht driver named Heinrich Bauer, interviewed in 1952 by a West German intelligence officer, claimed that his transport column was diverted south on April 20th under direct order from an SS Sturmbannführer named Falken. Bauer described multiple covered trucks escorted by black uniformed personnel with no visible unit patches. He was ordered to remain 50 meters behind and maintain lights off, even during night movement. He last saw the convoy heading toward the Dachstein Massif, where, he swore under oath, searchlights from Allied aircraft illuminated the mountainside. He never saw the vehicles again. American post-war recovery teams scoured the Austrian Alps for Nazi gold and archives. Among their reports lies an obscure entry from the 3rd Counterintelligence Corps dated July 1945. It references the seizure of non-gold assets, believed to be of scientific character, and mentions civilian consultants from Wright Field arriving in theater. Wright Field, located in Dayton, Ohio, would later become synonymous with captured Axis technology evaluations, part of what became known as Operation Paperclip. By 1947, when OSS had been absorbed into the newly formed CIA, the surviving Eclipse documentation was scattered across 4 classified repositories. Each bore conflicting notes, one claiming the operation was financial in nature, another labeling it biological cargo, and a third tagging it under aeronautical anomalies. A 1954 memorandum between CIA technical officers explicitly mentioned post-recovery analysis of Project Eclipse artifacts at Fort Detrick, suggesting the materials were examined under biological warfare research protocols. Yet Fort Detrick's official records list no such intake. In 1961, a retired RAF cryptographer, Alan Price, claimed to have decoded an encrypted British transmission originally sent from Salzburg on May 3, 1945. The message read simply, "Eclipse reached final stage. American control now." Within a year of speaking publicly about his findings, Price died in a car accident outside Bristol. His notes disappeared from his residence before investigators arrived. Physical traces continue to appear in fragments. In 1978, Austrian hikers discovered rusted metal plating embedded in the ice above Hallstatt. Metallurgical analysis, conducted by the University of Vienna, identified the alloy as a form of magnesium titanium, composite not consistent with 1940s manufacturing techniques. The discovery was quickly seized by the Bundesheer, citing national security interest. No further information was released. Historians remain divided on the meaning of Operation Eclipse. Some interpret it as a desperate Nazi attempt to preserve wealth for a post-war underground network. Others point to its peculiar inclusion of SS scientists, its lack of financial documentation, and its presence in intelligence archives labeled Technical Material, Category 5. A 1987 inquiry by the US Senate Subcommittee on War Records briefly referenced Eclipse-related transfers in connection with captured research materials. However, the entire section was later redacted under the National Security Act exemptions. When an investigative journalist filed a Freedom of Information Act request in 1998, the Department of Defense responded with a single declassified page. It bore only one legible phrase, "Project concluded. No further inquiry necessary." In 2003, a retired Austrian army engineer named Gerhard Kappel disclosed that during tunnel renovations beneath the Dachstein Glacier in the 1960s, construction teams encountered a sealed steel chamber embedded in the rock. Inside were fragments of machinery, unrecognizable and fused by heat. Before documentation could occur, Austrian and American officials sealed the chamber and reclassified the area as restricted geological terrain. Forensic analysis of surviving photographs reveals inconsistencies. The crates labeled Ahnenerbe Forschung in the Linz manifests do not match the standard dimensions used by the SS research divisions. Their construction suggests containment rather than transport, lead-lined, bolted, with shock-dampening frames. Such details imply that whatever was inside was not gold, nor paper, nor even human cargo, but something reactive, potentially unstable. Today, Operation Eclipse remains one of the least understood codenames from the war's final months. Every thread leads to silence, missing microfilm reels, vanished witnesses, destroyed warehouses. Scholars still debate whether the term anomalous magnetic yield referred to experimental energy systems, radar interference technology, or something entirely beyond the engineering capacity of the 1940s. What cannot be disputed is that between April 17 and April 25, 1945, a heavily armed SS convoy carried 12 sealed containers from Berlin toward the Alps and disappeared without trace. No Allied report accounts for the cargo. No post-war trial references its commanders, and every official record that might have explained its purpose ends with a single notation. Status: unknown. Whatever Operation Eclipse was, its shadow lingered long after the Reich fell, and somewhere, in the overlapping silence of missing archives and sealed mountains, that secret remains, waiting to be unearthed. Chapter 2: The Cold Vaults of Kolyma Sector. In the far eastern reaches of the Soviet Union, beyond the Arctic Circle, lies the Kolyma River Basin, an expanse of frozen tundra and permafrost once synonymous with forced labor, gold mining, and death. Between 1932 and 1956, more than 1 million men and women perished in the Kolyma Gulag system, officially recorded as the Dalstroy Industrial Trust. But beneath the documented brutality of its surface operations, fragments of classified Soviet records point to something buried deeper. An installation known in restricted KGB files as Object 742, codenamed Cold Vault. The first reference to Object 742 appears in an internal NKVD memorandum dated February 1951. The document, stamped "Совершенно секретно", top secret, orders the transfer of technical materials and personnel of German origin from Magadan to a secured site north of the Oymyakon Plateau. The attached personnel list includes 12 scientists identified only by initials, their original assignments listed under the heading T-Dienst, Peenemünde. That link alone, Peenemünde, has fueled decades of speculation, for it was there that Germany's advanced rocket and propulsion programs were conceived under Wernher von Braun's supervision. By late 1951, the site had been removed from all official construction maps. Soviet geologists who once conducted surveys in the area were suddenly reassigned to uranium extraction projects further west. Aerial reconnaissance photographs captured by US intelligence satellites in the 1960s show what appear to be reinforced bunkers cut directly into the permafrost, connected by an array of service tunnels. The entrance bore heavy shielding consistent with atomic test facilities, yet no Soviet nuclear tests were ever recorded that far east. The few surviving testimonies from Kolyma prisoners speak of trucks arriving under heavy guard at night, their engines muffled, their cargo covered with black tarpaulin. Prisoners were forbidden to look. Those who did were reportedly executed on the spot. A former guard, identified in a 1991 oral history archive as Sergeant V. Sidorov, recalled a specific incident during the winter of 1952. "We heard a sound, like wind, but deeper. It came from the ground. After that, the lights went out in the camp for 2 days. When they came back, 2 engineers from Moscow had disappeared." An unclassified fragment of a Soviet military operations log, recovered from the KGB's Far East archives in 1993, provides the most direct clue. It reads, "Object 742, Dzerzhinsky Continuum, Phase D to begin under Comrade Serov. Radiation and cryogenic parameters stabilized at -60. Historians have never been able to determine what Dzerzhinsky Continuum referred to. Felix Dzerzhinsky was the founder of the Soviet secret police, and his name was often used as a codename prefix for classified intelligence or counterintelligence projects. But the association with radiation and cryogenic parameters remains anomalous. From a technical standpoint, cryogenic parameters stabilized at -60 suggests experimental containment rather than extraction. Conditions designed to maintain materials or biological specimens at low temperatures. The term continuum may indicate ongoing reaction or energy output rather than a completed test. Western analysts reviewing declassified imagery in the late 1990s observed patterns of subsurface heating and magnetic interference inconsistent with standard geological phenomena. In plain terms, something inside the Kolyma tundra was generating measurable energy fluctuations long after the site was supposedly sealed. US Air Force intelligence documents, part of the now partially declassified Corona satellite program, note a distinct anomaly in infrared scans over the region in February 1962, exactly 3 weeks before a known Soviet nuclear test at Novaya Zemlya. The coordinates match those of the presumed Kolyma facility, yet no explosion, crater, or thermal event was detected at the site. Instead, the sensors recorded a brief but intense emission of electromagnetic energy, followed by complete blackout. Shortly thereafter, Moscow declared the area uninhabitable due to radiological instability. By 1963, all cartographic references to Object 742 were erased. The Gulag camps nearby were dismantled, the remaining prisoners transferred westward, and the region sealed under the authority of the Ministry of Internal Affairs. A classified Soviet directive known as Order 1042A explicitly forbade aerial overflights below 20,000 meters. Local populations were forcibly relocated under the pretext of environmental contamination. Those who resisted were disappeared. What happened inside the cold vault has been pieced together only from whispers. A debriefing transcript from 1974, obtained through smuggled microfilm, records an interview with a defector named Dr. Leonid Kravchenko, a physicist formerly attached to the Siberian Atomic Research Division. Kravchenko claimed that Object 742 housed a system derived from German research, intended to manipulate magnetic resonance under cryogenic compression. His testimony was erratic, his health rapidly deteriorating. He described a device that operated not as a weapon, but as a field generator. one capable of suspending molecular activity at variable frequencies. He died less than a year after his defection. His autopsy revealed unexplained cellular degradation consistent with prolonged radiation exposure. Satellite photographs from 1981 show that the permafrost above the presumed facility began to sink, forming a depression roughly 2 kilometers wide. The official Soviet explanation cited thermokarst erosion. However, US Geological Survey experts who reviewed the imagery identified symmetrical collapse patterns typical of engineered subterranean structures, not natural thawing. When the Soviet Union fell in 1991, journalists attempted to reach the region. Among them was a Czech documentary crew led by Pavel Vondra. Their film equipment captured glimpses of abandoned observation towers and ventilation shafts, half swallowed by snowdrifts. On the audio track, a low-frequency hum can be heard, steady, mechanical, unbroken. Hours after that recording, the crew was detained by Russian border security and expelled. Their film reels were confiscated. Only a poor VHS copy of their footage survived, later leaked in 1994. Sound. Engineers who analyzed the recording claimed the hum contained modulated frequencies within the 1722 Hz range, the threshold of human infrasound perception, known to induce unease and disorientation. In 2002, a team of independent Russian geologists attempted to study the area again under the pretense of permafrost research. Their GPS data logs show equipment malfunctioning repeatedly within a 5-kilometer radius of the site. Magnetic compasses spun unpredictably. Digital devices froze. One researcher, Dr. Natalia Petrova, reported feeling pressure in the chest and auditory distortion before losing consciousness. The team aborted the mission. To this day, no verifiable images from inside Object 742 exist, but the fragments of evidence, the NKVD transfer lists, the radiation logs, the recurring mentions of Phase D and cryogenic containment, form a pattern too precise to dismiss. It was not merely a mining or storage site. It was a controlled environment for an experiment whose parameters defy simple categorization. When former KGB archivist Mikhail Lobanov released the Dzerzhinsky Continuum memo to the public in 1993, he vanished shortly thereafter. His apartment in Moscow showed no signs of forced entry. Only his passport and a single photograph remained on his desk. A snow-covered tunnel entrance, its steel door sealed and marked with a faded warning stencil. Opasno, Object 742. Today, the area surrounding the old Kolyma Gulag remains off-limits, designated as a biological hazard exclusion zone. Yet satellite readings continue to detect intermittent electrical emissions from beneath the ice. Each pulse follows a precise 37-day cycle. No official agency has offered an explanation. Perhaps the cold vault was a failed Soviet experiment in energy research. Perhaps it was something recovered, not built. Whatever truth lies frozen beneath that permafrost has been buried deeper than the bones of those who built it. And like the hum still echoing across the tundra, its silence endures, constant and unanswered. Chapter 3. Ghost Squadron. The disappearance of KG-200. Among the labyrinth of obscure Luftwaffe units that operated during the war, none inspired as much secrecy and speculation as Kampfgeschwader 200, abbreviated as KG-200. To most historians, it was a covert operations wing specializing in deception flights, long-range infiltration and special missions behind enemy lines. But buried inside that already opaque command structure was a subunit, listed only as 3 KG-200, that vanished entirely in the final weeks of the war. Its last recorded operation involved a captured American B-17 bomber repainted with Allied insignia, departing Rechlin Air Base on April 20, 1945. The aircraft's call sign, Tango Red 7WIIs. Destination unknown. The surviving mission log, recovered from Luftwaffe archives in 1950, contains an unusual entry. Under Objective, the flight commander had written a single word, Nordlicht, German for Northern Light. Allied signals intercepts from the same date record a short, encrypted transmission from Rechlin to Flensburg, Unit 3 in air, cargo secured. God with us. The call sign abruptly cut off 10 minutes later. No distress signal followed. For Allied forces tracking the German collapse, it was just one more flight lost amid chaos. But to intelligence officers who studied the post-war records, KG-200's final mission appeared anything but routine. During interrogation of captured Luftwaffe personnel, a former adjutant to General Major Werner Baumbach stated that Unit 3 was not under Baumbach's operational control, describing it instead as attached to SS Scientific Command under Standartenführer Falcon. That name would reappear years later in US documents relating to paperclip recruitment lists, though with no rank or affiliation noted. The adjutant further recalled that Unit 3's orders were hand-delivered by courier, bypassing all Luftwaffe chain of command. The courier carried authorization bearing the signature of Heinrich Himmler himself. Eyewitnesses on the ground at Rechlin described the modified B-17 as unlike any other captured bomber. Its fuselage was reinforced with unknown alloy panels, and its bomb bay had been converted into a sealed compartment accessible only by code lock. The aircraft's weight ratio indicated additional mass inconsistent with standard payloads. Maintenance logs mention vibration anomalies during ground run-up and magnetic compass interference during calibration. One engineer noted in pencil, "Do not use standard fueling mixture. Oxidizer instability suspected." When the aircraft departed under heavy cloud cover, it was escorted briefly by a pair of Me-262 jets before ascending north toward Denmark. It was never seen again. British radar stations along the North Sea coast recorded an unidentified aircraft matching its signature briefly at 23:40 hours, then losing track of it over the Skagerrak. RF flight control at Cranwell logged it as hostile, probable decoy. The entry was later stricken from the daily report. After Germany's surrender, Allied intelligence began piecing together the remnants of KG-200's operations. Among the captured files was a dossier labeled Nordlicht. Inside were aerial charts of Norway's Arctic coastline, centered on the island of Svalbard. The folder contained no orders, no flight manifests, only one cryptic notation: cargo to be delivered to Base Odin, 78 de Groningen sector. No record of any installation by that name has ever been found in German or Norwegian archives. In 1952, Norwegian fishermen working near Kongsfjorden discovered twisted metal fragments frozen in sea ice. The pieces bore English stenciling but tested positive for German-manufactured rivets and fasteners. Embedded within one of the fragments was a melted alloy composite that metallurgists from Oslo University could not identify. According to a declassified Norwegian defense report, the material emitted a low-level magnetic field, not consistent with any known aviation alloy. The fragments were quietly transferred to NATO custody. Their current location is unknown. Further intrigue came in 1956, when a former KG-200 radio operator, living under alias in Munich, confessed to having transmitted coded messages for Operation Nordlicht. He described hearing voices over the headset not belonging to any crewman, voices that repeated navigational coordinates in distorted German. He insisted that the frequency originated from the north, not the aircraft itself. His statement was recorded, filed under unsubstantiated, and sealed. He was found dead 2 months later, cause listed as carbon monoxide, poisoning. The American Air Force's Air Technical Intelligence Center, ATIC, opened a file on KG-200 in 1958 under reference number 8int9315, possible precursor to experimental propulsion systems. It examined testimony, suggesting that the B-17 had been modified to test a non-chemical power source. These notes mention Falcon collaboration with Skoda, works in AEG engineers, magnetic rotation engines, and mercury-based plasma reactions. Though such concepts sound like Cold War mythology, corresponding reports from Czechoslovakia confirm that the Skoda facility had indeed been experimenting with rotational field generators under SS supervision in 1944. In the following decades, the story of KG-200's disappearance faded into rumor, dismissed as another Nazi escape legend. Yet in 1979, during a US geological survey mapping mission of Svalbard, an aerial imaging anomaly was recorded. A perfect circular indentation, roughly 120 meters wide, partially concealed beneath glacier ice. When researchers returned to the same coordinates a year later, the formation had vanished, buried by fresh accumulation. The archived thermal imagery, however, indicated residual heat beneath the ice. The temperature differential was inexplicable for a polar zone at -20 degrees Celsius unverified. Reports from local trawlers speak of brief radio bursts intercepted in the Arctic between 1970 and 1984. The signal, transmitting on a narrow band between 14.3 and 14.6 MHz, repeated in 5-minute intervals, each message encoded in obsolete Luftwaffe cipher groups. The final sequence, translated by amateur radio historians, read, "Nordlicht active, await extraction." Whether the broadcast was a hoax or an artifact of atmospheric interference remains uncertain. NATO never issued a statement. As late as 1999, a US Navy submarine operating near the Barents Sea detected unexplained magnetic anomalies consistent with large ferrous structures beneath the ice shelf. Classified sonar imagery reportedly captured outlines resembling a fuselage. The Navy denied all inquiries. When investigative journalist Erik Strand attempted to pursue the story for the Norwegian Broadcasting Corporation, he received an anonymous fax containing a single line: "Base Odin never closed." For intelligence historians, the disappearance of KG-200 stands at the crossroads between documented fact and suppressed history. The Luftwaffe's own administrative records confirm the existence of Unit 3. The US and UK archives confirm intercepted transmissions. The physical evidence, metal fragments, radar traces, and intercepted frequencies all exist, but refuse to form a coherent narrative. It is as though someone meticulously excised the connective tissue linking them. If Unit 3 was transporting a weapon, its design was unlike any conventional ordnance. If it carried personnel, no crew list survived. Some researchers propose that it transported stolen Allied intelligence or experimental materials meant for post-war bargaining. Others insist it was an early test flight for technologies later concealed within the post-war aerospace programs of both superpowers. What remains irrefutable is this: an aircraft left Rechlin Air Base under SS command in April 1945, its cargo sealed, its mission logged under the codename Nordlicht, and it vanished somewhere between the European mainland and the Arctic Circle. Nothing from that flight was ever recovered that could conclusively prove its fate. The ocean keeps its own archives, written not in ink, but in silence, and somewhere beneath that cold northern water, perhaps near Svalbard, perhaps far deeper, the final chapter of KG-200 waits, frozen beneath the weight of time and secrecy. Chapter 4, Operation Morning Star, the Prague Cipher. In February 1948, as political tension gripped Czechoslovakia and Soviet influence began to consume its institutions, a British SIS operative under the codename Galahad arrived in Prague. His mission, according to partially declassified British Foreign Office papers, was not political. It was archaeological in nature. The target, a hidden wartime cache buried beneath the substructures of Prague Castle, reportedly containing encrypted Nazi archives related to something called Project Morgenstern, Project Morning Star. Officially, the mission never took place. Unofficially, fragments of intercepted communications, coded telegrams and eyewitness reports confirm that Galahad entered the castle tunnels on February 27, 1948, and never emerged. The origins of Project Morning Star trace back to 1944. Within a set of recovered SS research documents from Berlin, British intelligence analysts discovered repeated references to a cryptographic liaison between the Reich's Chiffrierstelle cipher office and the Imperial Japanese Navy's communications bureau in Tokyo. This cooperation, understood to involve the exchange of encrypted field codes, was unsurprising at the time, but the Morgenstern documents added an unusual layer. Mentions of intercontinental signal propagation tests using low-frequency transmissions, not for messages, but for synchronization. The implication was that both Axis powers were attempting to develop a shared, time-locked encryption system, one that could transmit and receive preset frequencies years apart, yet still decode into coherent data once the sequence completed. The war ended before Project Morning Star could be realized, or so history records. But what SIS recovered in Prague suggested otherwise. The cache allegedly contained machine components, reels of coded magnetic wire, and an archive of cipher tables stamped Morgenstern, Prague, phase dry. According to later field dispatches, these artifacts were hidden by fleeing SS cryptographers in early May 1945 as Soviet troops approached. The Czechoslovak National Archive lists no record of such a discovery. Yet an internal SIS summary, dated March 3, 1948, 3 days after Galahad's disappearance, mentions successful initial contact, followed by loss of signal at 22:14 local time, when Czechoslovakia fell under full Communist control days later, the British Embassy burned its own files. By the time Western operatives could return, the underground chamber beneath the castle had been sealed with reinforced concrete by Soviet engineers, ostensibly as part of stability works. Decades later, the Soviets themselves treated the site as classified, maintaining a small KGB detachment within the castle complex. The name Morgenstern would not surface again publicly until 1961, when American SIGINT analysts at the NSA detected a repeating, low-bandwidth signal broadcasting from Central Europe. Its format matched no known radio transmission pattern. The encoded bursts repeated every 72 minutes, consisting of rhythmic tonal variations resembling Enigma cipher groups, but with an additional fifth rotor substitution. An impossibility for any authentic wartime machine. Attempts to triangulate the signal led nowhere. Each broadcast originated near Prague, yet its exact source shifted slightly each time, as though reflected or scattered. In 1963, MI6 issued a brief internal notice to cease all inquiries into former Project Morning Star files, subject now under Soviet purview. The order came directly from the Cabinet Office under the code Directive 33-9B. Throughout the Cold War, Czech technicians occasionally reported interference on military frequencies, anomalous bursts of Morse-like tones between 9.3 and 9.7 MHz. Each sequence began with the phrase, Morgenstern bleibt aktiv. Translated, Morning Star remains active. No nation ever claimed responsibility. When the Prague Spring Uprising occurred in 1968, some resistance radio operators claimed to have heard the same signal again, stronger than before, overlapping standard broadcast bands. On at least one occasion, the message was followed by what sounded like distorted human speech, a fragment resembling German, then silence. In 1974, a former Soviet communications officer named Sergei Dolmatov defected to the West through Vienna. During debriefing, he claimed that in 1951, while stationed in Prague, he had overseen the reactivation of a buried transmitter beneath the castle complex. He described descending into an airless chamber containing two massive reels of wire connected to machinery older than the war. His orders were to keep it operational and ensure its power cycle never failed. When he inquired about its purpose, his superior, a colonel from Moscow, told him only, "It listens." Dolmatov's debriefing transcript was classified immediately. He died 2 years later of sudden cardiac failure. Investigative interest revived briefly in 1989 when the Iron Curtain collapsed. That year, an independent Czech radio engineer named Thomas Cerny recorded what he believed to be a residual Morgenstern transmission while testing homemade shortwave equipment. The tape, dated October 17, 1989, features a faint numeric sequence repeating 3 times, followed by the distinct phrase, "Signal stable, Morgenstern active." Acoustic analysis confirmed that the tone modulation matched the earlier NSA intercepts from the 1960s, despite a 25-year gap. Cerny submitted the recording to the Czech Technical University. Weeks later, his lab was burglarized and the tape vanished. He later fled to Switzerland, claiming his phone had been tapped by unidentified operatives speaking fluent Russian and English. Archaeological surveys of Prague, castle conducted after 1991, uncovered sealed passages leading downward beneath the old royal palace. Ground-penetrating radar revealed a large metallic mass roughly 20 meters below the surface. When the Czech Ministry of Culture attempted excavation, they were blocked by NATO consultants citing structural instability. No further digging was permitted. One engineer involved, Jana Holubova, later told Czech television that while calibrating instruments near the tunnel entrance, her equipment picked up electromagnetic interference like a heartbeat, steady and repetitive. Documents later surfaced through FOIA requests to the US Department of Defense, referencing joint acoustic monitoring of residual axis broadcast frequencies under the Morning Star Agreement, 1949 present. Though partially redacted, these files confirm that Western agencies continued monitoring a persistent radio transmission emanating from Prague coordinates well into the 1990s. None ever identified a transmitter. The signal strength fluctuated seasonally, rising during the winter months. In 2005, Czech archivists rediscovered an unmarked box within the Prague National Archives. Labeled only MS 1948, inside, were fragments of encrypted telex sheets and a small copper tag, engraved with Galahad, SIS-4Q. The papers referenced signal alignment via static ground, resonance, and reactivation of carrier wave pending confirmation from Tokyo. How a British operative obtained materials tied to wartime Japanese signal research remains unexplained. To this day, the Morgenstern signal continues to appear intermittently on narrowband shortwave frequencies, every few years, without pattern, always repeating the same words: Morgenstern bleibt aktiv. Amateur radio groups have captured it as recently as 2021, though official agencies dismiss it as atmospheric echo, yet its timing, modulation, and persistence, spanning 7 decades, defy simple coincidence. Whether Operation Morning Star was a cryptographic experiment, a wartime failsafe system, or something else entirely, it remains locked beneath Prague Castle's foundations. The tunnels where Galahad vanished are still sealed under reinforced stone, guarded by bureaucracy and silence. And somewhere beneath that ancient city, beneath centuries of power and conquest, a forgotten machine may still hum, transmitting into the dark, waiting for a signal that history has long since forgotten how to answer. Chapter 5: The Black Archive of Operation Paperclip. When the Reich capitulated in May 1945, the victorious Allies initiated an unprecedented scientific scavenging operation, codenamed Paperclip. Under this program, the US government secretly transferred over 1,600 German scientists, engineers and technicians to American soil. Their expertise would feed into rocket research, jet propulsion, chemical weapons, and intelligence technologies. But hidden within those official lists, meticulously catalogued by the Joint Intelligence Objectives Agency, JIOA, was a redacted entry line that has never been fully explained. Asset Group 9B. The group's name does not appear in the main JIOA manifests. Instead, the only known reference comes from an internal memorandum dated November 2, 1946, sent from General Hoyt Vandenberg to Colonel Donald Putt of the US Army Air Force's Scientific Division. It reads, 9B assets received via Bremen, reassigned under civilian oversight, Wright Field, Level 3. The phrasing, civilian oversight, was unusual, as every other transferred scientist fell under direct military command. No subsequent correspondence mentioning Group 9B has ever surfaced. The few fragments that exist paint an unsettling picture. Personnel rosters obtained through partial declassification in 1999 list several names struck through with black ink, leaving only rank initials and a common identifier: Falcon. The name appears again in a separate OSS post-war memo referencing Dr. H. Falcon, previously attached to SS Sonderkommando Wissenschaft. His field: biopsychometric wave analysis, a phrase without precedent in any known scientific discipline of the time. By 1947, Wright Field in Dayton, Ohio, had become the nerve center of captured enemy technology. The facility's Level 3 archives, now believed to correspond to the underground laboratories at what would later become Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, were dedicated to projects involving biological interface research. According to internal Air Force invoices from 1951, one of the budget items included controlled induction protocols, target acquisition by neuroelectric feedback. The payment authorization bore Falcon's cipher signature, 3 overlapping triangles forming an abstract triskelion. In 1952, a classified Air Force report labeled Project Entelechia was circulated to select defense contractors. The accompanying cover letter from Major Charles B. Sanford described experiments designed to test cognition link response in isolated human subjects through signal entrainment. The language was deliberately vague, but laboratory notes later uncovered by investigative journalist Richard Haas in 1978 reveal more. Tests involving stimulated electromagnetic resonance in parietal cortex regions using captured VHF transmitter arrays, Eclipse, materials. The mention of Eclipse materials directly links the mysterious cargo from Operation Eclipse to these experiments, suggesting that whatever was extracted from the Alps in 1945 found its way into American research circuits within a decade. Witness testimonies from base, personnel further deepen the mystery. A civilian technician, Harold Denning, employed at Wright Field between 1953 and 1956, gave a taped interview before his death. He described An entire corridor underground where the air felt wrong, like static all the time. Denning claimed that the research there involved subjects, mostly volunteers from psychiatric institutions, exposed to controlled magnetic fields while listening to specific harmonic frequencies. They said it was about pilot focus under stress, he recalled, but the subjects changed. They'd stare at walls for hours. Then one by one, they were transferred somewhere. Phase 2, they called it. None of them came back. A fire broke out at Wright Field's sub-basement laboratory in February 1959. The official report blamed an electrical fault. Yet the incident occurred only hours after an unannounced inspection visit by representatives from the newly formed Advanced Research Projects Agency, ARPA. The blaze destroyed 2 archive rooms, including all microfilm copies of paperclip personnel transfers. Among the charred remains, investigators discovered fragments of sealed storage containers, each bearing the label Biofeedback Experimental 9B. No human remains were officially recorded, but local firemen later claimed to have seen metal gurneys and burnt restraints. Within months, the 9B designation vanished entirely from military paperwork. The legacy of Group 9B seemed buried until 1972, when a declassified Pentagon budget summary referenced continuing developments under Directive 9B, Behavioral Telemetry Division. It allocated funds to a civilian contractor known as Futura Dynamics, an aerospace research company that had absorbed multiple paperclip-era engineers. Futura's corporate headquarters listed as Langley, Virginia, a convenient cover shared by numerous intelligence-linked fronts. Between 1975 and 1980, journalist Richard Haas pursued the connection between Futura Dynamics and Wright Field. His research uncovered a retired Air Force colonel, James Harland, who confirmed the existence of the so-called Black Archive, a sub-basement chamber sealed after the 1959 fire. Harland described it as a vault without records, an area constructed from reinforced concrete, filled with racks of disused electrical panels and cylindrical metal housings. On the walls were strange markings, overlapping triangles, and a spiral emblem identical to Falcon's cipher signature. Harland stated that when base security reopened the chamber in 1964, the air was heavy with ozone, as if the power had only just been cut. His written statement was never published. Haas disappeared in 1981 while driving through rural West Virginia. His car was later found abandoned near an old communications relay tower, owned, coincidentally, by Futura Dynamics. A decade later, a Senate subcommittee on historical intelligence oversight briefly examined the remaining paperclip records. The final report, issued in 1993, made passing reference to documents withheld under national security grounds relating to non-consensual human research, reference designator 9B. The appendix containing those pages was classified for 75 years. No official explanation has ever been given. Technically minded historians note recurring technical language in Falcon's archived memos, psychometric oscillation loops, field synchronization thresholds. At the neural emission feedback, these appear to describe experiments in the interaction between biological systems and electromagnetic fields, far ahead of the neuroscience of the 1940s. Falcon's theories, grounded in occult terminology, treated consciousness as a measurable electrical resonance capable of external modulation. His 1943 SS notebooks, recovered partially intact from bombed facilities near Breslau, include the phrase, Der Gedanke ist eine Welle, nicht ein Ort. Thought is a wave, not a place. That same phrase appears decades later, typed, untranslated, at the top of a 1956 US Air Force technical bulletin titled Behavioral Modulation via Cognitive Frequency Response. The signature block is blank. Only the 9B classification code is visible. Even in the modern era, faint echoes of the project persist. Freedom of Information Act requests filed between 2001 and 2010 yielded only heavily redacted materials. One memo, dated 1961 but declassified in 2005, includes this single sentence: ensure all surviving 9B assets remain compartmentalized. Cross-reference with recovered Peenemünde telemetry files. A handwritten margin note adds, containment still operational, do not reinitiate. Today, the old Wright Field tunnels remain sealed. Official tours avoid their entrances, now blocked by welded steel doors and hazard signage warning of asbestos contamination. Independent researchers who attempted to access them in the 1990s reported audible mechanical humming behind the barriers, steady, rhythmic, faintly electrical. Local maintenance crews insist no power lines run beneath that section. In the absence of definitive proof, the black archive of Operation Paperclip endures as one of the most tightly controlled secrets in American military history. If it existed, it linked Nazi research, early Cold War behavioral experiments, and classified US aerospace projects under a single, continuous thread of inquiry: the manipulation of human consciousness through electromagnetic systems. Whether those experiments ever succeeded, or whether they were abandoned for ethical or technical reasons, no one outside the secure walls of that sealed archive will ever know. All that remains are fragments, burned reports, missing names, and the faint signature of a man, Dr. H. Falcon, whose presence lingers like an echo between two wars. In every surviving document, one phrase recurs, typed neatly at the bottom margin: Der Gedanke bleibt aktiv. Translation: the thought remains active. The world remembers wars through monuments and textbooks, but the real history lies sealed beneath layers of silence. Vaults filled with names erased, signals repeating into the void, and directives that never expired. Operation Eclipse, the Kolyma cold vaults, the ghost wings of KG-200, the Prague cipher, and the black remnants of Paperclip, all fragments of a machinery that may have never stopped turning. These stories end only in theory. In practice, they bleed quietly into the modern world through frequencies, institutions, and experiments still classified. What remains unanswered is not whether these events occurred, but whether their consequences were ever truly contained. And if they weren't, then perhaps the war never ended. It only changed its signal.